Hello, and welcome to my session. What does accessibility mean for multimedia? My name is Carrie Fisher, and I am your guide for this session. I'm a senior accessibility trainer and developer at DQ who's been building websites professionally since the early 2000s. I've spent the majority of my professional career working as a front end developer before focusing on UX and accessibility. This fall, I'm back at grad school to work on my PhD in human computer interaction at Iowa State University. For our visually impaired participants, I'm going to explain what I look like in my environment. I am not a princess or a Wookiee, but rather I have blondish shoulder length hair, fair skin, gray blue eyes, and today I'm wearing a black shirt. And I'm speaking to you from my home office, which has tan and blue walls covered with various framed artwork and a couple degrees. So, as a digital accessibility consultant who does a lot of client training, I get asked a lot of questions, especially about regulations and best practices. Lately, it's been all about videos, live events. We have changed, our environment has changed, our way of living has changed, and conferences, meetings, classes, pretty much everything is virtual. So, as we embrace that new normal, what should we be considering when it comes to creating multimedia with inclusivity in mind? So, that is the big question. And today, we're going to cover a little bit of why I'm here and why I'm talking about a little bit of my backstory and how I got into accessible multimedia. And we'll talk about the accessibility requirements along with that. Captioning, what are they? How to create them, do's and don'ts. Same for transcripts, audio descriptions versus extended audio descriptions, sign language interpretation, and finally, some tips and tricks on how to make your video or live stream more inclusive. And I'm hoping to leave just a little bit of time for some questions. All right, so let's jump into multimedia and WCAG guidelines. So my introduction to video accessibility came around 2017 when I started hosting a virtual meetup called Accessibility Talks, or ALLY Talks for short. I founded ALLY Talks as a way to spread awareness about digital accessibility and to also highlight some really awesome speakers in our community. In the beginning, the group just met informally, sessions weren't recorded, but it kind of dawned on me, soon realized that, hey, other people might want to hear what the speaker is talking about. And so we need to record these talks and we need to put them somewhere. So I chose YouTube as the platform at the time due to its flexibility and the available accessibility options, again, that I had at the time, including auto captioning, which we'll talk about in a minute. Little did I know at the time, of course, that the level of complexity comes with producing videos, hosting live stream events. When you're thinking about digital accessibility best practices can be complex. So definitely learn from my mistakes if you can. As I mentioned earlier, when it comes to producing accessible digital content of any kind, the best resource is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG as I like to call it, from the W3C group. The goal of this group is to provide single shared standard of web content accessibility that meets the needs of individuals, organizations, and governments internationally, and to make digital content more accessible for people with disabilities. So for this talk, I'm going to be focusing on multimedia. I'm not going to be talking about audio only or video only things like a podcast or a video tutorial that didn't have sound. Instead, I'm going to be talking about both sound and visual. But if you're interested in those kinds, if you're already producing content like that, you can look at the WCAG requirements. There are some guidelines out there for that as well. But if we're focused on multimedia on the web, the top four that we're really thinking about, again, are captions, transcripts, audio descriptions, and sign language interpretation. So the next kind of sections are broken into those four categories. We'll talk about a little bit of definition, who they target disability-wise, and what requirements that under the WCAG conformance, either A, AA, or AAA, that which one ever one you are following, these are the things that you have to do for the multimedia. All right, so what are captions? Briefly stated, captions are text synchronized with the multimedia for people who cannot hear the spoken words. In fact, if we did our job right, you should have some captions down there, a caption option right here on this video. And so again, these are captions are created for people who cannot hear the spoken word. Captions and subtitles are similar, but they are different. People often confuse them. Both are text synchronized with the words in a video, and both often appear in the same location in the media, usually at the bottom of that screen. That's why I'm kind of gesturing to that. But however, captions can be thought of as more of a transcription of dialogue for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, while subtitles are essentially helper text for people who might be able to hear the audio but may not understand what is being said. For example, garbled speech or words spoken in a language that you don't understand. Captions come in two forms, open or closed. So you're probably pretty familiar with at least one of those, the closed caption one. You see the CC button at the bottom of a lot of multimedia players, and it can be toggled on or off by the viewer by a click of a button. Oftentimes these closed captions they'll give you a little bit of options. So you might be able to increase the font size, color, the background color, right? There's a lot of different things that you can do often with those closed captions. Whereas open captions are essentially captions that are burned straight into that video. And so the user doesn't have any control over what that looks like. It's just there. Most people ask me, why would I want to do that when I could do closed caption? Sometimes, depending on the situation or how that multimedia is going to be consumed, maybe it's not inside of a player, maybe it's inside of an iframe, for instance, and you might not have that option in that environment. And so that might be a way or a reason why you want to use the open captions versus the closed captions. Here we are at the latest accessibility talks on YouTube, The Fatal Flaws of Overlays by Shel Little. And I'm just going to do a quick example of the captioning and how you would do it from a user perspective and how you would do it from a content editor or creator perspective. So again, imagine that you're a user, maybe you're hard of hearing, or you're in a situation or environment where you can't play the audio. We should all pretty be familiar with the CC button by now, that closed caption. Again, if you remember, open captions are burned onto the video. We don't have that here. What we have are the closed captions, so we can toggle them on and off. In this particular player, I have a couple options that I can choose as well. So right now I just toggled it. If you need additional user settings, you would come into this settings icon here. You go up to subtitles and you go up to options. And once you do that, you get a myriad of options. I'm going to pause this video real quick so we're not distracted by that. We're going to go back into those settings and let's see what we want to change it. So right now, again, it's the default. So I might say a little bit like a serif font, or maybe I want something a little bit more like Comic Sans, a little casual, right? There's small capitals. So again, depending on what your user needs are, you might pick a different font family. For this demo, I'm just going to keep the font color the same, but if I wanted to, I could change it to all kinds of different colors. Font size is the same. I'm going to bump this one up a little bit. Background color, I like the black and white. Obviously, that's the extreme color contrast. You get that 21:1. Can't get much more extreme than that. For my user needs, I'm going to keep it with black. The one thing I do want to change is that opacity, especially when I see a slide like this where I've got a lot of text. So I have text on top of text, and maybe it's difficult for me to see what's going on or to pay attention to the captions itself. So I'm going to bump that all the way up to 100, and you can see that that opacity changes and it's a solid black instead of a background that you could see through. So now I'm going to, those are my user settings. I'm going to go ahead and play And so that you can see that those are applied going forward. Here we are on the admin side of the event that we were talking about, the Fatal Flaw of Overlays by Shell Little. And we have a lot of options. Again, depending on your role or your media player, you might see a little bit different things than you're seeing on my screen. But the one we're going to focus on today are the subtitles. So we know that subtitles and closed captions are different things, but YouTube kind of uses those terms interchangeably. So sometimes you'll see subtitles slash CC. Sometimes you'll just see CC. Sometimes you'll see subtitles. So assume that they're kind of the same thing for the purposes of editing at least. So I'm going to press this and it sends me to this new page. And what we're seeing here is the automatic YouTube created captioning. And this is just what happens automatically. And what I do is I duplicate and edit, and then it turns into this file right here where you can see the difference between published by creator, published automatic. So I'm going to go ahead and press edit on the one that I've already worked on and added punctuation to. And what it does is it brings up this kind of modal and it shows me all of the captions. So we're going through and that's what we start with, right? There's some text. These are the timestamps, and so what it's doing is it's telling me where we are in the video. So if I jump all the way over here to 30, it's going to jump me all the way to that point also in the captions. I can edit this also as text. I know some people will take this file, they'll download it, they'll fix it in something like Grammarly or some other editor, and they will pop it back in to get some of the punctuation right and quicker. Depending on your workflow, you might have different options. What we do at Accessibility Talks, we let the captioning, the automatic captioning go through once. This first pass that we do manually is a quick and dirty. We go through, we change capitalizations, names, text, technical terms, that sort of thing. We fix all the things that we can do quickly. Then on the second pass, we come in and we add things like punctuation or pauses or just kind of something that makes it read a lot easier. And that's one of the questions we do get a lot about is punctuation and whether or not that's something that you need. So I say at the very least, you need to make sure it's accurate. The second pass is cleaning it up and making it a better, more robust user experience. All right, so now we're going to talk about WCAG requirements for captions. So I broke it down. Again, this is the 2.1 WCAG guidelines. And so I broke this down into A, AA, AAA, and then we also have pre-recorded multimedia and live multimedia. So you'll see this kind of table once or twice throughout the presentation for the different options that we have. So for the example of like our YouTube video, pre-recorded multimedia, once we've turned it into, we've gotten away from that live, we've gotten into that pre-recorded video. If I'm targeting A, AA, or AAA, it's required. Just everyone that's required. Everyone needs captions pretty much. If I'm talking about live multimedia, if I'm only going for single A, then I'm encouraged to have those live captions. Otherwise, again, it's required. AA and AAA, those captionings are required. If you want to know more about how best to caption, there is a session called Captioning Best Practices for Increased Engagement that's out there. Also, Imelda March, she recommends checking out the Accessing Higher Ground archives for this topic as well. So there's a lot of really great people who've spoken on this. Meryl Evans is another really great person who talks a lot about captioning, and she is a deaf individual as well. So lots of really cool things, a lot of speakers that are out there that you can learn a little bit more about proper caption techniques. All right, let's move into transcripts. So what are transcripts? Transcripts are text-based documents that serve as an alternative to information presented in an audible and visual format. They are suspiciously similar to captions, but they include more details. For instance, who is speaking in the interview or timestamps. So they're very intricate. And they take the experience to the next level by including important sound effects and other significant visual descriptions, describing like an eerie sound in the background. Transcripts help people who are hard of hearing and deaf, of course, but most critically, the deaf-blind population. Why this is so important is that transcripts are the only reliable way to communicate the full multimedia experience to the deaf-blind community. If you don't have transcripts, then someone who is deaf-blind will not be able to access your content, your multimedia content. So very, very important to think about transcripts. Transcripts, of course, are also great for other people, people with cognitive disabilities, people who want to browse through audio and video information at their own speed or their own pace. And as a bonus, search engine optimization gets a boost when your multimedia includes transcripts, since bots cannot crawl your multimedia either. They're blind, they're deaf, they do not have hands. And so the only way that they can get that media currently is to get it through the transcript. All right, so here we are back on Shell's talk on accessibility talks. And what we're looking for this time are the transcripts. Your multimedia player might be different than this one. You might have your transcripts in a different place or a link out. Some people put the transcripts also in the comments section. So depending on your workflow and what you're doing, yours might be slightly different as well. But for the just standard YouTube transcripts, what I'm looking for here are these three dots right here. It's next to the word save. And I'm going to choose open transcript. And you can see when I did that, the top chat replay pushed down to the bottom a little bit, and then we popped in this transcript right here. YouTube doesn't do a lot with transcripts. It doesn't really give you a lot of options as a user or as an admin. Your transcripts are essentially your captions with that toggle timestamp. That's the only thing you can do, is you can toggle that on and off. But it's, if you look, it's exactly the same as the captions. So they do it a little bit differently, but transcripts are really important because people who are deafblind, this is the only way that they're going to get your information from your video. So definitely make sure that you have that enabled if you don't already. The WCAG guidelines for transcripts are for pre-recorded multimedia for A, AA, and AAA. They're encouraged, or required. And for live multimedia, as you might imagine, there is no equivalent, so it's not applicable to live multimedia. All right, on to audio descriptions. So again, what are audio descriptions? They are a version of the multimedia file that includes a narrator explaining important visual information, such as unspoken actions and events, for the benefit of people who cannot see what's on the screen. Audio descriptions, unlike captions and transcripts, are a recording of a person explaining the visual aspects of the video that aren't in the video's original dialogue or narration. So, for instance, describing a facial expression or maybe the background scenery. So, something that you would pick up visually that you wouldn't pick up if it wasn't described to you. Audio descriptions should convey visual information verbally that dialogue and other sounds cannot. Sometimes audio descriptions need to be very detailed due to the large amounts of information, but there's just not enough pauses in the video and the audio descriptions to work. So that's when extended audio descriptions come into play. So extended audio descriptions are, as the name implies, essentially expanded audio descriptions. In extended audio descriptions, a video will pause and will give a narrator enough time to convey the information in the video. Audio descriptions and extended audio descriptions primarily help people who are blind or people who have low vision, but also could help some people with cognitive disorders as well. On to our example audio description. I'm going to play two audio snippets. The first one is going to be the trailer without a visual, so just the audio for the trailer. And then the second audio snippet is going to be the audio description with the trailer. Let's see if you can guess what the movie is by just listening to the audio without the descriptions, and then see if the description helps you figure out the mystery movie trailer.
Ooh, hello.
Okay, so that was a audio only trailer for a movie. Some of you might already recognize which movie it is. Now let's hear the same trailer with the audio description added.
A carrot-nosed, coal-eyed snowman shuffles up to a purple flower peeping out of deep snow.
Ooh, hello.
He takes a deep sniff. His nose lands on a frozen pond. A reindeer looks up and pants like a dog. Seeing the reindeer slip on the ice, the snowman smiles and moves towards him, though actually he's running on the spot. The reindeer falls on his chin. The snowman uses his arm as a crutch. The reindeer paddles his front legs. Head over heels, the snowman crawls along the ice. The reindeer does the breaststroke. The snowman rolls his body, but flips onto his back. The reindeer's tongue sticks to the ice. The snowman held his head. Twig arm and reindeer lips tug at the carrot. The carrot flies off and lands in soft snow. The reindeer goes after it with Snowman and his body parts hanging on his tail. The snowman puts himself back together again and glumly contemplates his noseless state. The reindeer jams the carrot back in place and pants like a proud puppy. The snowman pats him with his stick-thin arm, then goes to sneeze. He grabs his nose with both hands. His head shoots off.
If you haven't seen this movie before, it is Frozen with Olaf and Sven. So they had some shenanigans going on the ice, and you can hear what a big difference it was between having the no audio descriptions and the audio description. It was completely a different user experience entirely. So definitely want to consider audio descriptions in your multimedia. All right, let's move on to the WCAG requirements for audio descriptions. So you can see across the board for pre-recorded multimedia, A, AA, or AAA, it's required across the board. We do have a big asterisk for level A, and basically it's saying it needs to either have the audio descriptions or a media, time-based media equivalent or alternative. So again, what that usually means is you have a more descriptive transcript that has that visual and auditory information provided in addition to the traditional transcript or the traditional captions. For live multimedia, for audio descriptions, it is optional, again, across the board. As you might expect, the extended descriptions are usually more detailed and only required at the AAA for pre-recorded multimedia. So that probably isn't most of us in the room, but it isn't necessarily a bad thing to consider if you have the time and the budget to include the extended audio descriptions. Okay, let's now talk about sign language interpretation. What is it? So, as you might imagine, sign language interpretation for multimedia is when you add a person who is the sign language interpreter to the video or the live stream. Usually, that person is either in a box, like on the side to the video, or if it's a live event or live streamed event, that person could be standing actually next to the person speaking. Sign language interpretation is very important for multimedia since many people who are deaf, sign language is their first and most fluent language. So, sign language interpretation is often also more expressive than just written transcripts. So, it can provide a much richer experience than captions or transcripts alone. Sign language, however, can be cost prohibitive to many organizations. Certainly to accessibility talks, we don't have that expertise on our staff, and it's not something that we can afford with no budget. But even if you did have the budget, you have to know that it's a little bit complex because there's over 300 different sign languages throughout the world, including, American Sign Language, British Sign Language, and many others. But there's also dialects, regional, and group dialects, and it gets complex, right? So adding just one sign language interpretation to your multimedia would maybe not be enough if you have a global audience. So definitely something to consider. Now let's see an example of sign language interpretation. I have purposefully hidden the title of this video so you can't tell exactly what this young lady is signing, which is kind of the point, right? So this isn't for us, this is for people who are deaf, people who know sign language, obviously, as well. And you can see that she is signing something, and it's really more expressive than just captions. If I turned on the captions, we can see the words. And if there's any BTS fans out there, you probably already know that this is Butter. The WCAG requirements for sign language interpretation, for the most part, are optional for both pre-recorded and live multimedia. The only exception to that is pre-recorded multimedia when you're targeting AAA. In that case, it is required. Here are some tips and tricks for multimedia. Some steps for making your multimedia accessible. My recommendation is that you focus first on your captions and getting them in place, getting them as accurate as possible. Because they are very time consuming to add, if you have the option to pay someone to do it, by all means, do go ahead and do it if you have that budget. If not, just know that the captions are basically fundamental to your transcripts, which could also lead to your audio descriptions. So I really want to make sure that we start with those captions. Plus, they're required pretty much across the board for all multimedia types, both pre-recorded and live. So we 100% need to focus on our captions first. Next, if you work on the transcripts or audio descriptions. Again, like I mentioned, the captions are a good place to get that baseline that you can build off of, especially for transcripts. That's a really easy one most of the time. Again, it depends on how complex your video is, but usually the captions are pretty close to the transcript if you're doing something like accessibility talks, where it's just an interview or a presentation style, where you don't have to describe background noise or scenery or give additional context to what is going on the screen. And the third kind of big step here is making sure that if you need to add sign language interpretation, 100% across the board, leave that to the pros. There's often local companies or organizations in your area that might be able to help you with this. If you do find someone who's a sign language interpreter, definitely pay them for their work for this. It's really hard work. So definitely want to think about the different options there. Depending on your level of WCAG conformance and how much effort you've already put into your multimedia, you may have to rethink your workflow a little bit more, but don't be discouraged. With all things accessibility, You bake it into your process once, you learn the new workflow. In the long run, you're going to save yourself some time, some money, and overall effort. Of course, along with your captions, your transcripts, your audio descriptions, and your sign language interpretation, you also need to think about the content that you're presenting on the screen and how you're presenting it. So for info and sharing, kind of the first step, I want to start with the basics. I want to introduce myself, of course, give my name, maybe give some more context like I did at the beginning of this presentation. I talked about what I look like, what I was wearing, and a little bit about my environment. You don't have to go overboard, but just kind of give a little bit more visual context to people that may have those visual needs. If I'm sharing a slide deck, I want to go ahead and do that before so people can follow along, especially important for people with cognitive disabilities. If I have any alternative, or if I have any visuals, I want to either explain them or in the format that they're seeing online, alternative text is key. For color, I've noticed that dark backgrounds can be helpful for people with lower vision or might have some migraine disorders or vestibular disorders. So dark backgrounds, again, that's kind of a personal preference a little bit, but I do know that when we go into real rooms and real conferences, they seem to pop out a little bit more in most contexts. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind if you're thinking about slide decks. Of course, you want to ensure that color alone is not the only means of conveying information. So I definitely don't put up a color and not explain, like if I had a graph and I have green and red, but I don't have any additional information there. If I couldn't tell the difference between green and red, how am I to understand the graph on the screen? And of course, color and contrast, we want to make sure it's sufficient for text. We want to make sure it's also the same for essential icons. For text, we want to make sure that each slide is a unique title. This is especially true when you convert it over to like a PDF or you're giving it to someone who has a disability or using a screen reader. You want to make sure that they don't think that they're seeing a repeat of the slide over and over again. They want to know they're on a new unique page. My question always is my text big enough? Is my font family easy to read, right? There's a whole gamut of resources that you can get about that. But the kind of the quick and dirty is you want to use that larger font size, 18 points or larger whenever you can. And sans serif fonts that are common, like Arial, for instance, or Open Sans, those are ones that you want to use for a lot of different reasons that I won't go into today, but just know that they are easier for the majority of people to read. Speaking of reading, readability is also important. So you want to make sure that content is written at that 9th grade level or below. You don't want to use a lot of technical jargon, at least without explaining it. If you're doing a more technical talk or advanced talk, that might a little bit of gray area there on how far you can push that. For last, here we have that less is more for visuals and images. We want to make sure that we limit those animations. We want to limit some of the visual interactions and things because we don't want to trigger seizures or migraines or some other sickness in our users. We want to, of course, explain the images to non-sighted people. Or in my case, if I was doing a demo or I was displaying something on the screen that was important to the context, I definitely wanted to explain it to somebody who may not be able to see the screen. If you display code using something like CodePen or some other way that someone can actually touch the code and use the code is super ideal. HTML works well for that as well. And so that way they can get into it and actually see it. They don't have to necessarily blow up the screen or try to get to it with their screen reader. They can actually go to the code snippet. And of course, like I've already mentioned, vestibular and seizure, but we want to make sure nothing's automatically moving or moving more than 5 seconds, no flashing, strobing, that sort of thing. We definitely don't want to make our audience sick. Lastly, creating accessible multimedia involves a lot more than just adding captions or transcripts. It's important to consider how all types of multimedia elements affect your users as well. By taking a little bit more time and building these accessibility principles into your images, into your slides, into your presentation, you will undoubtedly reach more people on their terms. So, as George Day, a professor at the University of Toronto and an expert on inclusion, would say, inclusion is not about bringing people into what already exists. It's about making a new space a better space for everyone. And thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to speak today. We have a few minutes for questions, but if for whatever reason we don't have time to get to your specific question, you can find me over on Twitter or LinkedIn at Carrie Fisher. The slides are also available on my Noticed account as well. That URL is right there. And if you want to learn a little bit about accessible multimedia, it's kind of what I just went through today, but in article form, you want to share it with somebody, there's a URL for that as well. So I appreciate you all coming and listening and look forward to your questions. Thank you.